feel like your life is getting away from you? Do you ever feel like, I don't know, the years are shorter? Do you ever feel like things are just rushing past you? Maybe you're a parent or a grandparent and the kids just keep growing and you're like, when did this happen? I remember when you were this big. Ever feel like life is just running away from you? A few months ago, I saw a clip that embodies that feeling, I think. The feeling of life running away with you, if you'd watch this. What you just witnessed is life. No, what you just witnessed is a tradition in the UK. It's called the Cooper Hill Cheese Rolling Contest. Here's what happens to this tradition. People, evidently in droves, show up to participate in this race down this hill. And at the beginning of the race, there is a wheel of cheese rolled down this hill. And the point of this race is to be the first one down to the bottom to cross the white line. And they have evidently heat after heat. That is sometimes what it feels like, right? In life. Falling head over heel. Maybe you're just holding on and you're kind of just shuffling down, trying to figure out, but you're grasping for straws. There's this seemingly never-ending race to the bottom of the hill. Maybe the white line keeps moving and you're like, how am I going to get down there? I keep running, I keep falling. And many of us here today feel like the people who tripped and fell. There's actually that man that at the end there that flipped. There are some videos of that from different angles. I don't know how he's alive. He fully sent it, okay? He went all in. But here is the deal. That might be what life feels like for us. And maybe we feel like we're chasing after this cheese, chasing after the cheddar, to use the parlance of the youth. And what we find out is that, man, I don't know if this race is worth running. And I don't know if the cost is worth it. But you don't really know how to get out of that race. You found yourself at the top of that hill and someone said go, and now you don't know the exit strategy. Our bosses set never-ending deadlines, and the emails pile up faster than we can respond. You had a to-do list that was supposed to shrink during the day, but it didn't for some reason. Many of us wake up already behind, and by the time we lay down at night, we're thinking we didn't get enough done because the tasks are nagging. The pressure to produce and to perform, to be faster, better, stronger, more efficient, becomes a weight that never lets up. And if we're honest, it's not just about the pressure from our bosses or for our companies or for, whatever it is that's feeling that. It's also something that we put on ourselves. When we tie ourselves to our worth, we tie our worth in what we accomplish. So when the work never ends, the race never ends, and we topple and topple and topple. So that leaves us feeling like we're out of control of our own lives. Does this sound familiar to anyone here? And it's in this drowning feeling that I want to ask you this question that we've been asking here for the last few weeks. Is there a better way? Do you believe that? Do you believe that there is a better way? Today, to answer that question from a different angle, we turn again to Jesus. Henri Nouwen once wrote this little book called The Way of the Heart. And in it, he makes a really striking statement. He says this: in solitude, we become aware that our worth is not the same as our usefulness. That is good, because that isn't what the world tells us. That we're the only valuable when we produce, how much we get done, and how fast we get down that hill. And so what Henri Nouwen is pointing out to us is that in this little pamphlet, in this little book, that Jesus lived a completely different rhythm. That he didn't feel the need to chase after the cheddar. That he wasn't driven by pressure or deadlines or popularity. Instead, he followed a different flow that he set for his life. It went like this. He withdrew to solitude, he prayed, he entered worship, and then from the center he served and performed miracles, and then he returned again to solitude with the Father. That is the pattern that is the heartbeat of his ministry. And I think if we slow down and trace that pattern down through his life and through the Gospels, it will show us the better way to live. So today I want to take a walk through Mark chapter 1. This is a microcosm, a taste of this pattern in Jesus' life. So the book of Mark moves pretty quick. It's a fast-moving book. It's not like the Gospel of John that it just kind of seems like, how are there 85 verses in this chapter? This is like, let's go. So maybe for that hurried feeling of life, this is a good book for you. And so in this chapter, Jesus has just been baptized. Okay? He was baptized by John the Baptist. And then in verse 12 and 13 of Mark 1, we read this. At once, the Spirit sent him out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness for 40 days. Being tempted by Satan, he was in the wild with animals, and angels attended to him. This is before his public ministry begins. So he is baptized, and you get a larger story of both of these in other Gospels, where Jesus is out and being tempted, and he's tempted 3 times. And it's out in the wilderness, in the solitude that he goes, where Jesus goes and he prays, he fasts, and he resists temptation. Then, in verses 21 through 22, we read these words. They went to Capernaum. And when the Sabbath came, Jesus went to the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. So he's in the wilderness, then Jesus goes to the synagogue in Capernaum, and he teaches with authority in an act of worship and proclamation in the house of God. Then from there, in verse 29 through 31, we see service. As soon as they left the synagogues, they went to James and John, to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. And the fever left her, and she began to wait on them. Immediately after he enters Simon's house, immediately after leaving the synagogue and worship, he then goes and serves by healing Peter's mother-in-law. And this isn't just power, it's personal, compassionate service. Then he goes from there in verses 32 through 34 and performs a miracle. That afternoon, after the sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door. Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak, because they knew who he was. That evening, the whole town gathers at his door. Jesus heals many who were sick and drives out demons. This is a burst of miraculous ministry flowing out of the rootedness that Jesus has. And then in verses 35 through 38, we see that Jesus returns to solitude and prayer to begin this cycle over again. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him. And when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you!" Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That's why I have come." And then Jesus withdraws again to pray. And when his disciples finally find him and they want to drag him back into the crowd, back into the busyness of his life, back to the things that were summoning him back to town, he goes, "No, I'm going somewhere else. There's something else I have to do. I need to stay about my business, which is preach. That's what I came here to do." Do you see how this all flows out of a rhythm? Notice how Jesus doesn't bounce from need to need, from miracle to miracle. And notice how Jesus isn't running on empty. Jesus steps away. He centers in on the Father. And then he moves out in power. That is the better way. Jesus had intention in his pattern. He had rhythms. He had a built-in consistency with his life that he would not stray from. And that is the way of God. I want you guys to think about this idea of there being a pattern. There is a pattern in the laying out of the whole of the cosmos. There is a rhythm to all of it. There is a consistency. The gravity that Newton found moves at 9.8 meters per second squared here on Earth. It is consistent every time. If you notice, there is a pattern to the world. There are seasons. Here, it may feel like there's only a couple, but there are 4 seasons that move through the calendar. And in those seasons, there are months and there are weeks. There is full moons and there is waxing and waning. And there are 24-hour days. There are weeks. There is a pattern. The moon and sun rise in a pattern, and they move and rise every day, and they move through your sky. When you do a study on the life of the Israelites in the Old Testament, and you go back into the first 5 books, and you get into Leviticus, and you get into the law, and you get into Deuteronomy, and you see what Moses gave to the people of Israel, he gave them a structure of life that was marked by calendar events throughout the month, throughout the year, for them to mark and remember what God had done for them. That is actually a unique thing to the Israelites. It is a unique thing to early religions on this planet, that they would remember in their calendar the things that God had done for them. And it becomes a signpost for them. And even those patterns in the calendar Jesus used and God used in Jesus' life, marking the Passover and him being the Passover lamb and him having the Passover meal the night before he is taken, the Seder meal, all of those things are patterned and on purpose. But the thing is, we, modern people with our advancements, have distanced ourselves from the natural order. We have created our own little suns that turn on with the flick of a light. No matter how many of us it takes to change the light bulb, they will turn on if put in correctly. We have climate-controlled homes with multi-zonal treatments so that you have the right temperature in your room and they have the right temperature in their room, and it's not too hot, it's not too cold. Even though people still fight over the thermostat, we got our own little climates in our houses. We have cars that have auto-start features on them so that when we get in and they're already cold or they're already hot. And we have heated seats and cooled seats so that our tushy doesn't get too warm or too hot in the summer. And then we have steering wheels so that our fingies don't get burnt when we grab onto the steering wheel. We have disconnected ourselves from some of the patterning of this world. We buy coats that would allow us to survive the winters of Alaska. And I know what you say. It wouldn't be so cold if it wasn't so windy here. I know that happens. And it's going to happen sooner than you think. But we can shield ourselves from those things. And we take ourselves out of some of the natural order. And I am not saying that these are bad things. I applaud, what's his name? Carrier, the inventor of air conditioning. I would give him a big hug because I'm so thankful for air conditioning. What is his first name? Doesn't matter. We got it. But when we lose sight or connection to the patterns of creation, I think we also lose sight that there is a better way for us to connect. I think some of us need to touch grass. I think some of us need to put our feet in the dirt and touch grass. We need to reconnect with the ways of creation. And I think we need to pattern ourselves. We need to have rhythms in our lives. To regain control of our lives, of that race down the hill, what we need to do is we need to grab back what we can. Dave Ramsey is a financial advisor. Allison and I took his Financial Peace University early on in our marriage, and it has helped us tremendously. But he has some very interesting insights about budgeting and about money. And I want to kind of talk about those because I think they apply today. I'll show you. This is some things that Dave Ramsey has said. He says, the goal of a budget is to assign every single dollar a name on purpose before the month begins. He has another quote that says, when you give every dollar a name and write it down on paper, you're telling your money what to do, instead of scratching your head wondering where it went. What I want to ask is, what happens if I replace money with time? So walk with me on this. The goal of a budget is to assign every single second a name on purpose before the month begins. when you give every minute a name and write it down on paper, you're telling you're telling your time what to do instead of scratching your head where it went. I know some of us feel like we're not in control of our time, that we have all of these different things going on, but I want to encourage you to think about in your life, in the budget of time that you have, how can you take control? How can you grab back your minutes? If you don't give your time a name, hurry will steal it. Last week we talked about this yoke of Jesus, and I told you that to live in that yoke would require intentionality. I told you it's a fight to stay focused on what matters most, but it is worth the fight. And I think the tool to fight for focus is giving your time a name, because if you don't, it will just disappear on you. To steal a phrase from the 90s pop philosopher's Smash Mouth, the years start coming and they don't stop coming. Anyone? I'm not going to sing the rest of the song, not today. If you want to become better masters of your time, then we need to provide structure to it. And if we don't give ourselves enough structure, then our lives may become more and more chaotic. What I want to talk about today is this plant. This plant is a monstera. It sits in my office here at church. Gotta be gentle with it. If you'll notice, here in the planter we have these two wooden stakes. These serve as the trellis for this plant. This is the structure for this plant. If you notice now, as you look at this plant, leaves are going everywhere. They're all spread out. And this plant is actually working hard to keep itself supported. It's expending energy to do so. And so, if you're a monstera plant owner, normally you might use a moss pole, but we're not going to get into that. What we do is you would put it onto a lattice or onto a structure, a trellis, to give it support so that it can grow in the right direction. And that's what I want to talk about with you today. That is the tool to regain your time. See, because the first thing we have to do with our time in our lives is we have to take a look at what's actually going on. Do an audit and look at what are the things that are in my life that aren't giving me life that I can get rid of. What are the things that are a distraction, that are pulling power? And so what you do is you take that and you get rid of it. And you deadhead that. Because you need room and space so that you can operate and let the fruits in the Spirit grow within you. What's interesting is this used to be tied to these poles, but I took it down because they were tied too tight, which also applies. If you're too rigid with this system, if you're too tight with this system, it will also kill growth. That's called legalism. We don't want that either. But what we want to do is we want to take a look at the plant and we want to recognize which way it's going. There's actually two plants here, if you notice. There's two kind of monsteras kind of sharing the same root bed, which is why there's two posts. And so what I want to do is I want to begin today by taking these small ties. So what you begin with is a daily rhythm, a daily practice that says, hey, when I wake up in the morning, before I grab for Zuckerberg's Facebook, before I go and reach and check my emails, before I brew my cup of coffee, or maybe while brewing my cup of coffee, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have my life centered on God. So I'm going to pray the Lord's Prayer. I'm going to thank Him for letting me wake up this morning because it is a gift. And I'm going to take those and I'm going to begin to give myself structure in that. And I'm going to tie those things on in my life. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another branch of my life and I'm going to say, you know what? Once in the morning isn't enough. So midday, I'm going to take 3 minutes. I'm going to take a break before I eat my lunch. Not give God a microwave prayer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 minutes of silence and breathe and remember who holds my life. And then you continue in the day. And at night when you lay your head down on the pillow, and what you do is you reflect on what one way God was present with me, and you do that every day, and you make that a practice for yourself. And you continue to bring structure, and you tie yourself to the strong things which are the things that saints down through the ages have done. And you pray to God for that. And every day you're reading God's word, you're praying, you're doing those things to give yourself structure. But then you expand that out. And what you do is you go, okay, that's my daily patterns. What are some of my weekly patterns that I have? Maybe through my week, I'm in a small group and I have church. Those are some sturdy things. Those are some strong things. And so weekly, what I begin to do is I begin to give myself a weekly schedule and say, I'm going to do this every single week. Yes, every day I'm doing those 3 things. I'm doing these 4 things. But here, I'm going to go every single week. I'm going to practice maybe Sabbath. I'm going to take a day to say, I'm not working today because I want to give God glory and trust with my time. And then you maybe once a week, you share a meal. You share a meal with someone and friends or family, and you put the phones aside and you make sure that God's at the center of the conversation. That's a practice. Give thanks and talk about what God is doing and accomplishing in your life. And so you tie yourself to that, and you give yourself that structure. I'm a little scared of this one, just so you know. I told the worship band that I'm scared I'm going to break this one off. If that happens, it's part of the illustration. Whoops. And so you say, once a week, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to set aside time, but then also I'm going to talk with a family or friend about what God's doing, or talk about Jesus and not just what went wrong at work today. And then you take yet another wider step and you say, you know what? I need seasonal and yearly structure to my life. I've got my daily, I've got my weekly, and now I need my yearly. I need to pin my life around these moments. There are natural moments in the year that happen. You have a new year where we all feel like we're getting a fresh start, even though we get a fresh start each morning. And so what we do is we say at the beginning of the new year, I'm going to take a look at this and say, how is this structure working? Or you go during the Advent season, the lead up to Christ's birth, you say, I need to do certain things, right? And so what you do is once a year around the Advent, you begin to let the church calendar dictate your time and not your works calendar. Or maybe once a year you go, you know what I need to do? I need to get away. I need to go on a retreat. I need to go walk in the woods and have some silence for a little bit. I need to go and be with God and be silent and trust Him in that silence. And we're going to give ourselves some structure. I need a longer line than that. Right? We have daily, weekly, and yearly and seasonally rhythms that we do. And we tie this structure together and we bring it all in and we go gentle with it. We are easy with ourselves in it. We're not holding ourselves religiously. We're not going to judge our spiritual life. That's one thing you have to know. Oftentimes what we do is we judge our spiritual life on the watering system and on the structuring system and not the overflow. See, because maybe you're thinking your spiritual life is reading the Bible and prayer, and that's your spiritual life. That's the watering system to your spiritual life. That's the structuring system to the life that God wants you to have and bear. So don't miss that in the midst of this illustration. I am not going to tie that one up right now. We also, because I don't want to break it, and I want to take some time and not talk while I'm doing it. And then what we do is we take a step back and see how the plant's shape is stacking up, how it's looking, what's it's doing. I am going to tie that. How is it coming together? How are these things working out? How am I giving it structure? I get my roots in the right place. I do that. And then what I do is I go, you know what? This leaf out here, it's taking energy from the plant. There's still things I need to get rid of in my life. There's still things that need pruning. I've gone through this process, and now that I've been living it for a while, God is searching my heart and revealing to me, hey, there's more stuff. There's more stuff that you can get rid of. And it may look like, oh, you just got rid of a big leaf. This is a big part of your life. That could have been beautiful, like one of these top leaves. But sometimes God doesn't want to give you the good things. He wants to give you the best things. Because in this process, what you have to recognize is God has your best intentions at heart. And so then you take a step back and you take a look at your life and you recognize, you know what, this gives me new control of my time. No longer is it running wild without, it keeps doing that. It's no longer running wild, running free, without control, without a name. And we allow God to work in us, to bear the fruit in us that we need to bear. I recognize that for some of you, this sounds insane. It's too rigid. This is too rigid. I can't do that. This isn't freedom. I'm supposed to be free. I'm free in Christ, which is true. What I want you to know is there is freedom in structure. That's what we see in creation. There is freedom in structure. There's others of us who go, this is far too hard. Start small. Start out with those small things. Take a look at your life and find a few minutes, a couple of times a day. Start small, and then let that grow and blossom with the intention of moving forward. And then for others, this sounds exciting. And for those of you that this sounds exciting, I want you to know that this is freedom. This is a beautiful thing. And for all of us, no matter where you're at in this conversation, I want to encourage you that God does not invite you to rigidity. He doesn't invite you to do more than you can handle. He doesn't invite you to bite off more than you can chew. He invites you into rest, which is why one of the most famous Psalms, Psalms 23, tells us what? He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. This is not about carrying a heavier load. It's about learning to walk at Jesus' pace. Remember those words from last week. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. That's why when St. Benedict wrote his famous rule of life, by the way, that's what the church fathers call this, is a rule of life. That's the name for it. The early church fathers called the trellis, regula, the rule of life. And so when St. Benedict wrote out the rule of life for his order of monks, it began with these words: nothing harsh, nothing burdensome. I'm not inviting you to add a bunch of things to your life. I'm not challenging you that the better way to living is to just blow everything up and then only do these holy spiritual things. It's not what I'm inviting you to. What I'm inviting you to is to nothing harsh and nothing burdensome. What I'm inviting you to is to the yoke of Jesus. And I want to give you a structure to do so because it's so ambiguous sometimes. Sometimes we want to grow in our faith and we want to grow in our walk and we just don't have the tools. We're told, read your Bible and pray, and it's like, okay, nail it. And then when we don't do that, when it's hard for us to get up early and it's hard for us to read, we beat ourselves up. And then what ends up happening is the trellis falls apart. And then we end up falling farther and farther away, and it doesn't hold. There has to be grace and mercy in this. This isn't about adding more pressure. It's about finding freedom in a pattern that holds you up so that you can live in power and in purpose and in presence of the Father. If this is something you want to dig into after service, I have some handouts that I will give you. I have some things, some tools that the women's group have been through. They actually went through this about a month ago. They went through a rule of life. I also have books here. My Bible's on top, but I have books here that talk about this, if this is something that you'd like to get into, because I believe that this is a tool that can bring us freedom. So here is the invitation for today as I come to a close. God isn't asking you to add more to your already hurried life as you run down that hill and smash your face over and over again. That's not what we're asking for. What I am asking for in the invitation from God is to find rest for your souls. Just like Jeremiah 6:16 says, this is what the Lord says. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it. And you will find rest for your souls. Friends, this is exactly what this trellis, this rule of life is. It's choosing an ancient path. It's choosing the good way, the way of Jesus. It's saying, I don't want to keep running until I burn out. I want to walk with Christ at his pace, in his way, with his life. And when you do, you will find rest for your souls. You will find freedom. You will find that your life is no longer being stolen away and disappearing, but instead, it's being shaped into something beautiful and fruitful at the hand of God. So today, the choice is in front of you. The crossroads are here. Will you keep racing down the same road? Or will you stop, look, and step into the way of life, the way of Jesus, the better way. Will you pray with me?